Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome to Spirit Speakeasy. I'm Joy Giovanni, Joyful Medium. I'm a working psychic medium, energy healer, and spiritual gifts mentor. This podcast is like a seat at the table in a secret club, but with mediums, mystics, and the spiritual luminaries of our time. So come behind the velvet ropes with me and see inside my world as I chat insider style with profoundly gifted souls. We go deep, share juicy stories, laugh a lot, and it wouldn't be a speakeasy without great insider secrets and tips. You might even learn that you have some gifts of your own. So step inside the Spirit Speakeasy. Hey, beautiful soul. This was such a fun conversation with my guest today, Lauren Nichols. Now, you might know that I'm a psychic medium. Lauren is as well, but she has this background in paranormal investigation and spirit photography. She actually worked with the Paranormal Research Association of Boston and had multiple television shows where she did paranormal exploration. So I ask a lot of questions about getting started with paranormal investigation, and she gives us the basic steps and what we need to know to start doing our own spirit photography, which sounds really fun, and how to start communicating with the spirit world with a flashlight, which is something really cool that she has done quite a bit and posts a lot of her videos about. And trigger warning, we get into, towards the latter third of the conversation, her activism as a person who experiences long COVID. And it's something that is largely misunderstood. She goes into talking about, how her experiences with the medical system and how through this experience of long COVID, she has found her voice and has really used this challenge, this really difficult experience, and has shared so publicly. I have seen multiple posts over the last few years of her really just being vulnerably open with the details of her journey, and has really used her voice for activism. So we talk a little bit about that. And what I love is, we're all on a spiritual journey of some degree, whether you're a medium or whether you are just a champion of the underdog, not just, but it's just so interesting that sometimes in the most unexpected ways, our next section of our path can become clear just because we feel like we can't be silent about something anymore, or we're experiencing something and we know other people are too, and it's our nature to help. So our soul is encouraging us to speak out. So it's really incredible to hear how her journey with long COVID helped her find her voice and helped her step more fully into activism. So that's a really fascinating part of the conversation. You're not going to want to miss this one just because there are so many juicy tips for us around, is it better to do paranormal photography inside or outside, day or night? How do you know what's dust and what's an orb or a spirit person? So I ask all the questions. You're not going to want to miss this one. Step inside the Spirit Speakeasy with me now and join this conversation with me and Lauren Nichols. I am Joy Giovanni, Joyful Medium, and this is Spirit Speakeasy. I'm really excited to tell you about our guest today, Lauren Nichols. You may know her from her work with the Paranormal Research Association of Boston. She had multiple TV shows as a paranormal investigator. She's also really well known for her spirit photography. You should check it out on her Instagram. She's got just some amazing examples of communication with spirit. She is, of course, a psychic medium, and she's also a long COVID activist, which we're going to talk about today. Now, one of the things that you really need to know about Lauren is that she is a government worker by day, but psychic medium all of the time, because that's just a part of her. So I'm so excited to have her share her journey with mediumship, her investigation of the physical phenomena of mediumship, as well as spirit photography and her activism work. You can check out her socials. Her website itself is psychicmediumlauren.com, but she's also got Instagram, which is Lauren the Medium. And she's got the most amazing link tree on there, which I'll link in the show notes so you can check her out, as well as find her spirit photography and videography on her Instagram. Help me welcome Lauren Nichols. Hey, Lauren.
Hi, Joy. It's so good to be on here. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
It is mutual. I have been waiting for this.
I know. Will you share a little bit with us about your journey and how you, for me, I think that this physical phenomena of mediumship and your spirit photography and your paranormal investigation, it's such an unusual thing for someone to get into who at the time when you started that didn't self-identify as a medium. And so it's so fascinating to me to consider that you were doing that when you didn't even think you were a medium, but you were still doing it from this perspective of, no, it's all love, it's all light. It's not, you weren't going after that shock factor of, all the stuff that we already know what it is. So tell us all about that.
Yeah, so for me, my introduction to the spiritual really started at birth. I think the farthest back that we go is when I was 3 years old. I had a really unique imaginary friend that was a Civil War naval captain named Captain Jack. Very odd for a 3-year-old little girl. I would describe, the buttons that he had on. Had no knowledge of the Civil War at the time. So it started really early. And then throughout childhood, like so many mediums, had visitations from loved ones and so forth. So I kind of pushed it aside, as many of us do throughout our childhood and teenage years. And then as I got into my young adulthood in my 20s, I started having more and more experiences. And I definitely know that they were trying to get my attention. I was becoming more aware, much more open. And I really, for me, what kind of sparked my interest in getting into the paranormal was really, it was a need to validate my experiences. I really wanted to, one, prove that I wasn't crazy, prove that the experiences that I had in childhood were coming from beyond and weren't explainable by some physical source. And I also was really just fascinated with the prospect of being able to communicate with them, because it had always been a one-way street where I was receiving, I was seeing them, I was feeling them, but I didn't know how to communicate. So for me, getting into the paranormal side was really my attempt at opening up that door for conversation. And which sounds so bizarre, because I think most people, when they get into the paranormal, don't necessarily, they're seeking that. But however, there is this negative fear aspect, as you mentioned. And I think a lot of them don't necessarily want to have that contact. I was desperately seeking that contact. Even if there were investigations where there was quote unquote poltergeist activity, I wanted to talk to them. I wanted to know why they were throwing dishes. I wanted to know what upset them so much and what the person in the household was doing that triggered them to want to throw those dishes. So for me, it really was just
love that you came from I love that you came from this perspective of okay, something's happening. I need to do some almost like a scientific researcher. I want to do some investigation, some evaluation, and see what can I know is true. I just think that makes so much sense to me.
Absolutely. And I think what drew me to it too, and there were a lot of different investigation teams that were across New England, because as we know, there's a lot of activity up here. The paranormal teams are rampant, but I was very selective in the ones I chose, or the one I chose, because this one was a science first paranormal team. So its entire goal was to ultimately just prove via science the experiences that people were having. So for me, it fit right into my my wheelhouse, because I was in a way trying to see if I could disprove what was happening. And the scientific tools, the scientific understanding about electricity and what happens in those kinds of situations when you have, electrical issues within the home, what happens even in terms of our if there's carbon monoxide, our dioxide issues, what happens to the brain and how your senses are affected by that. So I was drawn to that because of that scientific aspect. And it ended up, if anything, it led me more into the understanding just about how real and authentic the spiritual was. Because there were, I would say, out of the 150 cases that I did, there were about 10 of them that had zero scientific explanation. And the others were easily explainable, wow. But the ones that were not explainable really kept me going and gave me more fuel towards investigating further and looking at it from a scientific lens and trying to understand what energy is, what we are, and then it kind of snowballed from there.
So what kind of things were happening early on when you said it just started stirring your curiosity and almost like compelling you forward to figure all of this out? Were there any specific things that were going on for you personally?
Yeah, so at the time when I was doing the investigations, I was struggling. So I had moved up to Massachusetts. I had left behind my whole support system, family, friends, everything, to be with an ex at the time. And I was in a very lonely state. And I think for me, I was searching for more. I was searching for connection, both beyond and locally. And what it really stirred up for me, I think when I was, so some of the experiences that I was having was, for instance, one of the investigations where we couldn't find a scientific reason for why there was these anomalous activities within the home, these unexplainable events that were happening, dishes being thrown, doors being slammed shut, all at the same time within the house. What I experienced during those events, while the rest of the team members were, or many of the team members were, for lack of a better word, freaking out, I was honestly began feeling into why they would be doing that. And I was asking the questions within myself, kind of intuitively knowing that there was an ability for me to just be able to speak with them and to get a sense of who they were. And I began realizing that they too were seeking connection, that they too were just seeking someone to communicate with, someone to share their story. So it really all became about connection, both for me, and I realized that it was for them as well. And that's when, for me, that's when that snowball happened, because I realized that we were after the same thing and that we both could help each other and that this was a mutually beneficial relationship and that I wasn't crazy, that there was external activities that were happening that could validate the kind of internal feelings and events that had happened in my life and that I had been experiencing. And it was just a remarkable experience that was much more of a positive one, much more love-centered than one of this sort of fear-centered discourse that I think a lot of people within the paranormal investigation world, unfortunately, speak to when they talk about the spirit world. It's unfortunately a lot of misunderstanding of them, because I think they are not as open to communicating and connecting as I wish that they would be.
Yeah. And I think, you make a lot of really good points. I think some of what's difficult, and we talk about this a lot here, is because of the way that, the paranormal or the spirit world or our crossed over loved ones are portrayed in, movies and dramatic other portrayals. It's almost like we have this preconceived notion that, some elements of this must be scary. And when things are happening, like dishes going across a room or, lights on and off, and what happens is sometimes I think the people in the home can kind of feel the energy of the spirit person, but our humanness reads it as don't understand, outside of me, different equals scary emotions. And I think the place they go is panic. Mm-hmm. How did you start to discern, having these experiences and realizing, okay, I can actually feel that this isn't an energy that's threatening in any way. It's just someone wanting to communicate. How did that start to come into more form for you? Do you know?
So yeah, for me,
that's an elusive question.
No, but it's a great question. And I think that's important because I would hope that my answer might help others to be able to discern too. So everyone is very different, but in my experience, I think part of the reason why I didn't jump straight into that, I didn't let my humanness take over, and I didn't let the fear of the invisible, of the unknown, scare me. I think part of the reason why that was the case for me was because my first experiences with the spirit world were with my family, or with my departed loved ones when I was a child. So I really had no reason to believe that spirit was negative or dangerous, because my introduction was a very gentle and soft one with my loved ones. And I think that what I had experienced, so as a child, I would have visitation dreams, and I would feel I would feel the presence of my grandma, or I'd smell my grandpa, and I would, have that comfort. So when I went into other people's homes, I took that with me, because the way that I viewed it was, well, this is possibly someone's grandma who's in the house and is just trying to connect.
Yeah.
So I made a mental decision to allow myself to give them the benefit of the doubt, and to say that this isn't some scary monster, that this is just another human being with a multifaceted personality, with needs, with desires. And for me, that mindset allowed me to soften how I viewed them, and allowed me to approach them more with this mindset of acceptance as opposed to fear and judgment right off the bat. And I do believe it was because of my younger experiences with family members that I had. And I just said, well, this is likely someone else's grandma, so why would I be scared of someone else's grandma? That was sort of my attitude with it. And I will say I've never had a negative experience.
Oh, that's so cool to know from someone who's done, this work in the field, that, maybe it's not their grandparent, maybe it's someone else, maybe it's someone, that has just interest in the home or whatever it might be. But I like how you explained a little bit more about your experiences just with your loved ones. Because I think often even that we sometimes, because of lack of understanding or lack of, talking about this culturally, we think it's going to be an apparition of grandma that's going to show up, sitting there, and the room's going to get cold. And it's often, that could happen, I guess, in rare occasions, but it's often, like you said, it's just the smell of your grandpa, or that feeling, and, memories coming in of grandma, or the dreams, like you said. So thanks for explaining that a little bit more.
Absolutely. It is much more subtle.
Yeah, so much more subtle than I think often we think it's going to be. And so I think people can discount those communications, because you and I know it's all about communication, like you were saying, and we can discount those communications thinking, oh, maybe that was my mind. Maybe I'm just wishing they were near me. Maybe that's not a strong enough hello, for example. With going into other people's homes, obviously those aren't your loved ones then, which I talk about this a lot, but I'll say it again, just for anyone who might be new listening. Everyone has abilities to connect with their own loved ones in the spirit world, which I know you believe as well. For me, the way I often explain it is the difference about being a medium is that we can also connect with other people's loved ones besides our own. So not everyone wants to connect with other people's loved ones. But is that how, when you started entering to other people's homes and started feeling similar feelings or having similar experiences, did that cue you into thinking, oh, wait, maybe all these other people that are on my team are freaking out. Maybe I've got some different abilities here?
It's funny because I pushed it aside. I did have those thoughts, but I rejected them because I didn't think I was worthy. I didn't quite understand it. And two, I had very significant confidence issues at the time. And I thought that this was just for, a select few, and that this was like the chosen people, that there was some hierarchy, which we know that there's no real hierarchy when it comes to spirituality. So I had believed some of what I had read in the spiritual circles at the time, and really just viewed myself as not worthy of being a medium. How could I be a medium? So what I did was, instead, I called myself a psychic, because I knew that I could pick up on energy. I knew I could feel, long before, even getting into the paranormal side, I could feel people's emotions. I could feel what they were feeling. And I would, have kind of precognition of certain events. So I viewed myself as a psychic, and that confirmed my being a psychic. However, it should have confirmed me being a medium, but I didn't let myself believe that because of these issues of self-worth. So what happened for me was more that it just confirmed that I needed to go deeper. It confirmed that I needed to dive deeper into the spiritual sciences, and to really wrap my head around what mediumship was, what psychic and intuition was, and comprehend it. Because for me to accept it, I needed to deeply understand it in order to allow myself to even say, yes, this is me. Because there was a lot of validation seeking going on that I was doing at the time, especially. So it did not happen in the moment, despite all of the events and them hitting me over the head. It took a lot longer for me to finally accept it.
Well, I mean, it's something good to acknowledge, because often, sensitives are sensitive, and we do tend to invalidate ourselves or have, histories where perhaps others have invalidated us, and we don't trust our gifts naturally. Some people do, but I think by and large, if you were to split it into a percentage, the larger percentage of us early on tend to think like, oh no, that's not what this is. And how could that be me? It's that, I guess, lately the term is imposter syndrome, right? I couldn't possibly have connection to the spirit world. But then as you dove in and really started understanding, even just from a physics standpoint, what energy is and how it works and the interconnection. And I'm wondering, does that then lead you to realizing, oh, none of us is more special than anyone else, and we have this energetic connection just, from a quantum physics standpoint by existing?
Totally. So for me, I think one of the things that helped me in accepting, there was a book called The Holographic Universe. And that book for me, it's a book really about quantum physics. And so you hit the nail on the head. It really was the study of quantum physics and me diving into that made me acknowledge that, oh, no. I'm not saying that I'm more worthy. I'm just saying that we're all capable, and I have every right to dive into this and accept this within myself. So you are spot on. And it's interesting because it was the physical sciences that actually brought me towards the spiritual sciences. And I think a lot of people assume that when you get into the spiritual, and you are in spiritual service, that you're detached and distanced from physical sciences. And that is the complete opposite. It just confirms it, and it helps you to better understand your own abilities. So it brings you closer to it, in my opinion. Knowing the physical sciences brings you closer to the spiritual sciences if you're just truly open to understanding.
Yeah. Well, and then there's this aspect too, that it's whatever way any one individual person finds into this spiritual connection is the right way for them. We all have, some veins of our story that are similar, but some for each medium I've ever met that are so specific to our personality and the way we needed to, come into these gifts in a more working, understanding kind of a way. So it's great that it's such a, maybe it's not the most common way to come in through the sciences, but I'm also one that likes to evaluate things that are going on, and I know it's a big part of both of our training to not just attribute every single thing that happens immediately to the spirit world or to, woo woo or hocus pocus. Sometimes something just fell down, or, it's not always, sometimes it's spiritual, but not always. I have to know, with one of the cases with the dishes flying, what was the communication that was intended?
So what I had picked up on, and mind you, this was before me really acknowledging that I was a medium, but the overarching, it was clairaudience that I was hearing at the time, though I wasn't acknowledging it. I was hearing thoughts. I was hearing things. And what I heard was that they were not liking what was done with the stairs. So they were doing renovations in this house, and it was a very old home back in Salem. And I think it was built in the 1700s, and the stairways were getting renovated, and they were upset. It was with the wood choices, they were getting away from the original wood, and there was an upset in what was happening in the home, and they were voicing their upset, and they were not being heard. So what they did was essentially result in just trying to get their attention in ways that they could. And what better way to get someone's attention than to throw a dish across the room? So this was their way of doing it, simply because they weren't getting any progress with talking or with, even shifting the bed. It was attributed to something else. So they were in a very, very dire way of just trying to get them to say, listen, I'm not liking what you're doing. And mind you, the people continued with their renovations, and it didn't really stop. But I don't know what happened in that house. I think that they, didn't follow up beyond that. But it was just someone that was very upset with the situation of their home being changed.
Well, and it's such an important piece of this to acknowledge a few things. One, I just want to explain for anyone that might be newer to this work or understanding their own gifts. When you're talking about the subjective clairaudience, meaning you're hearing things, it's not like, you know, a scary voice. It's almost like thoughts that are popping into your mind that aren't thoughts that you're creating yourself. It's through that connection with spirit, and it's internal in your own mind, like if a song just popped into your mind, except it's understanding about a person, you know, mediumistically outside of yourself. Am I doing a good job explaining your experience of that?
It's so true. I mean, it's subtle. And the way that I heard it at the time was in my own voice. And it was really as if I was thinking it. And so I hadn't acknowledged my mediumship at the time. And I did stop myself and say, why am I thinking this? And, but it kept coming. It kept coming multiple times throughout that night, throughout the investigation. And this is really what they wanted to get through. Meanwhile, I am thinking, why am I so judgmental about the renovation? So I thought it was me.
Oh my gosh, I love it. You thought it was at the time you thought it was your own thoughts. That's so
absolutely.
Did you, through this communication and through understanding what the intention was behind it and what the quote unquote message, if you will, about hey, we're not digging what's going on with these renovations, did you discern that it was a former owner of the house and then go back and do some research and kind of fact check, or how did that part work for you?
So at the time I didn't do that because I was still doubting myself. So I never really followed up with that. I never really dove deeper. Do I wish I did that? Absolutely. But I still was just not at that point of acceptance within my mediumship at all. I was thinking I was a psychic at the time. And even then I had no idea what a psychic was. So I just knew that there was something going on.
Interesting.
Didn't follow up. I wish I did on all of those cases.
Well, I mean, you really have continued to grow and expand. And one of the things that I want to touch into that I know that you're doing now is, I mean, you're a medium and you enjoy this work. And it seems like you and I vibe similarly, where this curiosity just continues to kind of nudge us and we want to explore and do our own experiments and investigation. You recently, I hope it's okay that I talk about this. I only know because we're friends on Instagram. You recently went on a little trip and did some of your own paranormal experimentation, demonstration. Will you talk a little bit about that? Because it was just so amazing and I want to make sure everyone gets to see it.
Absolutely. So yeah, this is so funny. So we went down to be with my family in Florida and it was a road trip. And on the way back, my wonderful husband agreed to allow us to stay overnight at places that were known as haunted locations. So, you know, he put up with it. I brought my equipment with me, some of my equipment, my EMF detector.
Okay, tell us what the equipment is so we know what it is.
I've got an EMF detector that can tell you when there's energy fluctuations within a room. So I have that with me. I had my flashlight. It's a twist on, twist off flashlight. You get a CVS for $5 or wherever, and just battery operated, which allows them to use their energy to be able to manipulate that flashlight, to turn it on and off, to answer yes or no questions, to respond to yes or no questions. And I also had a voice recorder in order to capture EMF or EVPs, so electronic voice phenomenon, which is just being able to hear objectively spirit voices. And there's different levels of EVPs as well, depending upon the scale of how clear it is. And so what we did was we took my equipment and we stayed, and I did a lot of research in advance because that's the fun part. I mean, it's all fun, but we stayed at two specific locations. So we stayed at Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And there is an area called Old Winston-Salem, which was a Moravian spiritual community or religious community dating back to at least the 1700s, I think a bit before. And there is can I say the name of the inns that we had stayed at? And that location? Okay.
Absolutely. I'll link it in the show notes in case anyone's trying to take a road trip.
So amazing. So the Brookstown Inn is the place that we stayed in New Hampshire. And that place has a history of having, there is a resident spirit there named Sally, or they called her Sally. And she died tragically in the mill in the 1800s. It was a former flour mill. And so I, of course, being a medium, and I wrote in the notes when I booked it, I'm a medium, please give me your most haunted room. I think it's room 402.
I love it.
And of course, when I came in, checked in, I felt so awkward. I was like, yeah, I'm that weirdo. Please let me in the room. So I stayed there, and that room was incredibly active. The minute I opened the door, I can't even explain to you what I saw just with my own eyes. I mean, clairvoyantly, not objectively. My husband did not see it. There was a lot of activity in the room, and I can go into detail if you want for each experience, but I did capture some really, really interesting, some at first a little scary when you look at them, images of a face that does look to have a brain exposed. It's missing its skull. And that was me taking a picture of a window, and that was superimposed on top of my face. So I did have a moment of humanness in that moment. I did have a little bit of a fear response, which I bet. Right. It's only natural. And that evening I had quite the spirit visitation in my dreams, and got the backstory via Sally, who was the spirit in the inn, and her passing and her tragic passing. And it was a lot of misunderstandings, and it was a really beautiful experience because I do feel that there was some healing that she experienced. I myself felt healed because I got to at least understand that the fear response that I had was unwarranted in that situation. And she showed me really why she was sharing that. And also experienced quite a lot within Gettysburg. So we stayed at Gettysburg, which is well known for being a paranormal hotspot, lots and lots of spirit activity. And we did do some kind of maybe not so legal activities. We did go on the battle, and I can say this now because it's fine, because there's a whole story around that. But we went on the battlefield at night, and my husband actually had experienced a spiritual encounter with me, which was just the most special.
Oh, that's cool, because I know that's not his thing.
Oh, no, he was never a believer, never, complete skeptic. And
interesting.
Watching him process what he had experienced was remarkable.
I bet it was a lot of fun. Wait, tell us, why did Sally in the hotel in New Hampshire choose to show you that imagery like that in the spirit photography? Was that the most condensed way she could get the whole message across to you? What do you think the reason was?
So there were two images. That one was by far the most disturbing for me at the moment. And there was another that I think was probably the most symbolic and really representative of mediumship. But if there's any picture I've ever taken that's representative of mediumship, it was this. And it is in the same exact window pane. So on the top floor, the fourth floor, me just taking a picture right where the elevator shaft is, and she had passed away in the elevator shaft, was an image of two women, me in the middle. So my face, you see me taking a picture, and there is a woman above me and then a woman below me. And I thought that was really interesting because, one, there was a fight between two women in this situation. Sally and another woman had fought.
Interesting.
And it was unique that I was in the middle because I felt as though they both were wanting to tell their side of the story, just in that single capture, that single picture that I took. And in that evening at night when I went to bed, so what I had experienced as a spirit visitation dream was the events that led up to Sally's passing. And what had happened that she wanted to articulate was that there was, unfortunately, they were all called sisters at the time. And it was I couldn't tell if this was her actual sister, but I later learned in the Moravian community, they were all called sisters. So this was one of her sisters that worked at the inn, or that worked at the mill at the time, which is obviously now an inn. And she was jealous of Sally's abilities on the job. She was jealous of how well liked Sally was, what a great worker she was. And she created this narrative that, Sally was XYZ, just really negative things about her. She was making fun of her weight, just saying really horrible things just to get her to leave so that she didn't have this threat in her mill. And Sally confronted them, a group of girls, actually in the room. So in the room that I had stayed in, that was their dormitory. That's where they slept. And she had confronted them. And unfortunately, Sally was ganged up on. And the takeaway message, and I experienced the moments just before her death in my dream. And the takeaway message that I had experienced, and it was really profound. And I actually woke up, honestly, I woke up both gasping and I woke up crying at the same time. It was maybe one of the most profound dreams I've ever had from a spirit, was that it wasn't the passing that had hurt her the most. It was that the people that she loved and cared for and thought that she could trust had turned on her. And that was her last memory before she passed. And I think that a lot of people, when they visit the inn, they do feel this overwhelming sense of sadness and uneasiness when they're on the top floor and when they stay in that room. And I think that that's what they're picking up on. It's not that she's some negative energy. It's not that she's out to hurt you.
Yeah.
It's really that she was hurt. She was really profoundly hurt. And I do think that image of that kind of exposed brain, I think one she was showing, and it's interesting because I swear there's a small smirk in that photo. When you look, there is a smirk. And
that's so interesting.
Was the thing that kind of scared me at first. But after I had that dream, I realized that she was just showing me, one, I'm here. This is how I died. I am Sally. This is what I look like when I hit the ground, kind of a situation. And also I'm okay. And in a way, it was almost like she was making light of it. Like, it was bad. The situation was bad, but I'm glad you're here and I'm ready to talk. It's kind of the impression that I got. So
wow.
It wasn't,
that's so profound.
I was scared going to bed that night. When I woke up, I was not scared anymore.
Oh, that's such a beautiful experience, and that she could communicate and clarify and share a little bit of her story and alleviate some of her own sadness, which, as we know, that's one of the reasons that spirit people, loved ones, come to communicate messages, is for the healing of people still on this side in the living and for their own healing. So that's so incredible. Okay, I have to ask, for anyone who is curious, maybe asking for a friend, for anyone who's curious about spirit photography, give some tips. How do we start? What's to know what to do, what to don't do? Definitely don't, use your phone. What's the best way to start capturing?
To be honest, it doesn't matter what camera you use. It doesn't matter if so on my trip, I used my iPhone. That's what I used. And I got a lot of full body apparitions. I have used everything from really nice Canon cameras, Nikon cameras. It doesn't matter. All that matters is the intent behind it, on top of other technical needs. So first and foremost, when you get into spirit photography, you have to have an intent of wanting to see them. If you are scared, if you are taking pictures in the dark and you're like, please don't be there, I don't want to see anyone, chances are
you make a good point.
I mean, you have to genuinely be open to seeing them, because they don't want to scare you for the most part. Do not want to scare you.
Yeah.
So the openness is key. Beyond that, once you have that openness and you really genuinely have worked through that fear, and it's hard to do. And I mean, the excitement can feel like fear too. So I just have to say that it's on the same spectrum, that nervousness.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, exactly.
So just knowing that it's coming from a positive place, that's what they want, is that positive excitement, but not the negative fear. So once you've worked through that, the technology behind it doesn't really matter. iPhones work just fine. I'm sure Androids do too. A phone is a phone. A camera is a camera. So what I would recommend, though, to really get good shots, you want to make sure, first and foremost, that your lens is clean. It doesn't matter what your camera is. Make sure that your lens is clean. Make sure that it is spotless. You do not want to have any sort of particles on there, any sort of anything that can cause a blur or distortion of what you're taking a picture of. So that's key. Second, you want to make sure that you have, if it's outdoors and you are taking pictures at night, you do need to have your flash on. You have to.
Okay.
Because I do believe that there is something to be said for the frame rate and how quickly the light is captured and how quickly you're able to get spirit energy in that moment. I think that none of us know the answer to it, but I have found that when I do take photographs with flash outside versus when I don't, I do end up getting apparitions. Full body apparitions versus, when I don't, because they're not, the energy doesn't show up as well. The other thing that I highly recommend is making sure that you don't have a lens strap in the way, making sure that you're not in a room that is dusty, because I think a lot of people do view dust as orbs, as spirit energy. And
I see it a lot. Where I'm like, that's a dust.
Exactly. And there are some key ways to tell what's dust and what isn't. I will say that if there is
tell us that for sure. We need to know.
If there is a color to it or colors within it, if it's rainbow-like in any way, it's spirit. Unless the only exception is if you are taking a photograph in a room and it's sunny and it's dusty, sometimes the light can refract and it can have that sort of rainbow look. So you just want to make sure that there's not much dust in your area. But really, if it's a filled out circle, filled out orb, or if there is a streak, so if there is a motion trail with it, and there is a clear motion trail, these are just some of the ways that you can tell if it's spirit energy. Versus an orb, if it's a dust particle, it's going to be more contained round circles. If it's spirit energy, there's going to be movement because they are moving. They're not just standing there, just waiting for you to take their picture. They're going about their business too. So you're going to see a trail. And then the other thing that I would highly recommend is just make note if you're taking pictures outside of the sun, because oftentimes lens flares get mistaken for spirit energy too. And it's the sun.
I think we've all seen just the green circle that reflects in a lot of pictures if there's sunlight or too much light, so that's good to know, because I do see a lot of the spirit photography I see I'm like, I think that's dust, and I'm not the best at discerning it either. So if I know it's dust, now, do you feel like if someone's just like at home in their own space and they're wanting to do it, should they have the intention of calling forward one of their own loved ones? Should they just do it and see if there's anyone around them in the space? How do they know if it's someone that's, like I live in a 30s Spanish cottage. How do I know if it's someone that at one point resided here that has an interest in this space? There are a couple that hang out versus like someone that I know that I love personally. It's a lot in one question, I know. I'm very excited about this.
It's a great question. So I think there's two things. I think my if you're not a medium, right? If you're just getting into it and you are maybe not as comfortable with the thought of spirit people in your home, I would say maybe don't start with taking pictures in your home, because you might scare yourself into not falling asleep at night. you might get some pictures.
Oh, that's
of
a good
dust,
tip.
Right? You might get some pictures of dust and be like, oh, nope, we've got a poltergeist here. I'm not sleeping tonight. So we don't want to scare yourself too much. So what I actually recommend first, and this really was how I got started in spirit photography, I went to the cemetery, and it is a great place to be. It's a safe space, if you will, to dabble in spirit photography, because one, it's a neutral ground. It's not your home unless you live right on top of the cemetery, in which case it's still not your home, right? It's next to it. But it is a way for you to explore. You can do it in daylight. You will still get orbs. You will still get apparitions in daylight. There's a lot of activity in cemeteries, a lot. And it's if we can get outside of the fear mindset of, oh my goodness, there's dead people here. They're very peaceful places, very peaceful energy, a lot of love in cemeteries as well. So my biggest recommendation would actually be to start at a cemetery, and just to, if you can, just meditate or just feel into the desire to capture anyone that wants to say hi. And that's generally what I do, is whoever is open to talking with me or showing themselves to me, I'm open to seeing you. And if you're not, well, then that's fine. I'm not going to force you. So, and they can't be forced anyway, but I invite anyone who would be willing. And then I just walk around and I allow myself to almost do a walking meditation. When I do it, I look at the trees. I allow myself to be present. I allow myself to pick up on anything I'm feeling. Am I feeling someone touching my shoulder? Am I feeling or hearing someone or am I just feeling this urge to look in a certain direction and then all of a sudden press that button and take that picture? That is what I would recommend for those just getting started. If you have experiences there, and more often than not, you will in a cemetery, I would say from there, you can kind of level it up and say, all right, let's try in my house now. And then from there, if you have that comfort, what I would recommend doing is just as you said, is sitting quietly, again, connecting and saying, anyone that's open, doesn't have to be a loved one, just anyone who's here, anyone who wants to make themselves known, I would love to be able to see you. I'd love for you to be in my presence if you would like. And then just do the same thing. Just allow yourself to be still, allow yourself to just feel what the room is feeling, allow yourself to really get into your senses. And then just start taking pictures, and you're going to feel silly doing it. You're going to be like, why am I taking pictures of this one corner of my room 50 times? But I promise you that the more you do that, the more you'll hone that ability, and the more that you'll learn to trust when and where to look. And you'll begin to feel into really them telling you when to take that picture, which is how it works for me. I think that I I am always open, and I always am down to connect at all times. And
I love it.
For me, I'm just like, hey, if you want me to be paparazzi for you, I'll happily just take a picture, but just let me know. So I think for them, there's a feeling that I get. And I think a lot of people who do spirit photography have said the same thing, that there is this urge, you get this urge to right then and there, just take that picture, just take it, just make sure it's stable. And make sure that you get multiple shots as well, because one shot is never enough. You want to make sure you take as many shots at once as possible so that you can discern if there's something else in that area that's possibly causing it.
I think that's a really important tip too, just to kind of, when you have that feeling, that it is, as someone grows and learns how to do this and maybe becomes a little more sensitized to what that feels like, that nudge to like click now, or, which is really cool. And then, yeah, I think too, just having fun with it and not taking it too seriously, and almost like if you're gonna just start doing some nature photography, just that same kind of lightness, and not putting so much pressure on it, and not expecting it to all happen, all of it the very first time. It does take some time, just like anything, to kind of feel it out, figure out, like you said, what's that nudge for each individual person? What's that, sensation of, okay, this corner versus that corner. So it is something that could be honed over time, it sounds like.
It totally is. And it's something that, so when I started out, I was not getting I wasn't getting full body apparitions consistently. I had started in a cemetery, and I was getting very colorful orbs. And then it kind of leveled up over time, over years, to finally getting full body apparitions and windows. And I think it's one of those things where, because I became so open and accepting of it, and I wasn't fearful. I will tell you, the first time that I got an apparition on my camera, I remember looking at it, and I remember running to my car. This is before I acknowledged I was a medium, and just absolutely freaking out and being so scared in that moment, because I was like, there was no one in this window. How could this be? And over time, I think that when I worked through that too, and as you said, honed it, because it's just like anything. It takes practice, and it's a skill. It's a hobby. And the more I did that, the more I got much more clear apparitions. And my trip to Gettysburg was just consistently like that. And I think that's because it's taken a long time for me to really just hone that craft, really.
Where did you get all the footage of the person who was communicating through the flashlight? I saw it on your Instagram at Lauren the Medium, so I know it's still up there. Where were you when you were doing all that? Is that Gettysburg?
That was not Gettysburg. So that was actually this summer. My husband and I went away for a quick weekend on Cape Cod in Orleans, Massachusetts. And we stayed at the Orleans Inn, which is a historic property as well. So again, everywhere I go, I was looking to connect. And we stayed at the inn, and I asked again for the most spiritually active room. And this room was on ghost hunters as well. And I'll save my comments for that show. But I was curious to see what my experience would be versus what I had seen years back. And because of my using the flashlight in my paranormal investigation days before acknowledging my mediumship, I just decided to bring it just to see. I hadn't actually done that. I hadn't used it in years. And I was just wanting to have fun with it and just see what would happen. So lo and behold, we brought it there, had it on a stable surface, got some fresh batteries in it, and I started asking away. But I did ask questions so prior to asking the questions, I wanted to make sure that there was a scientific, I wanted to make sure this was a scientific sort of process where I could validate that the answers, that if they were saying yes, that these were answers that I could in fact validate. So I did a little bit of research on the inn prior to going to the inn, so I could really make sure that my questions were appropriate and I would know if their responses were accurate or not, or if there was some glitch with my flashlight. And it was very much not a glitch. It was a full-on conversation. It went on 2 nights in a row, 45 minutes or so that it went on. I condensed it into, 10-minute little clips on Instagram because that's all it takes.
Yeah.
But it was 45 minutes of communication, and they were responding with historically accurate answers to their property. And that was in the summertime on Cape Cod. There are many places.
It's pretty amazing. If you haven't seen it,
because it's video, the watcher, the viewer, can see that you're on one side of the room. I think you're even in bed, and the flashlight's on some kind of like dresser or something that's clearly across the room. And you can see that there's no one around physically touching it, not a person who's in a body anyway. And you can hear you asking the questions. What I love about a lot of my friends who are mediums is we do tend to err on that side of what's the science behind this? What's the, do we have the control, if you will, set up enough so that, we couldn't argue, oh no, that there's someone right next to that, they're doing it. Or because having that skeptical mind as a part of this work, I feel like really helps to get the most pure data, if you will. I feel like we're all such secret nerds. It helps to get the most, you know what I mean? Like the most clear, okay, these are historically accurate answers. This is the information. Clearly you can see the way it's set up is in a way that it's so clear what's happening. It's pretty amazing. I was excited when you posted those. I was like, oh, what's Lauren up to now?
What weird thing is she doing? And it's so true. So I just had my phone, again, this was just recorded on my iPhone, had it set up on a microwave facing a mirror so that you could see this is where, and it's this flashlight, right? So this is where the flashlight is. And this is me sitting on the bed. My husband's on his phone, at that point, he did not have, he was part of that experience and he couldn't explain that away. But he hadn't had the experiences that we did in Gettysburg, which were just completely undeniable for him. It took a few tries to get through. But in those experiences, at that particular inn in Orleans, it was really special because, as you said, there was a control. And I think it's important whenever you're doing investigations, and especially for those that I think are just starting out with their mediumistic experiences and they are dabbling in paranormal investigations, to be able to have something that they can validate in the responses that they get. So, the history beforehand at the location so that what you're getting, what you're receiving, you can yourself validate. I think that is so key. And I think just as you said, I think we have to be a good, I think in my opinion, to be a good medium, you always have to make sure that you are ruling out everything else before you get to spirit. Not everything is attributable to spirit. And I think that, when we say everything is spirit, then nothing is spirit. And it cheapens it. And it also, it doesn't help us to really get their message and the power of their message across too, and their existence across. So I do everything.
And there's an intelligence there. So I think as a lot of our work, discerning, no, this is an intelligence. This is an intelligent answer. This is a question you can either research before or after, perhaps, if you're just kind of wanting to see afterwards. And I love that perspective. Okay, sorry, keep going.
No, but you're spot on. It is about showing the intelligence because there's, this isn't just, and you can see in the video, the flashlight responds and it turns off when I ask it to turn off. And, it is the intelligence behind it that I think is so important to capture, because I think that's helpful for people who are also skeptical watching it, for them to acknowledge that, oh, there's something more here. There's no tricks. There's no nothing. This is just pure communication that's happening. And it's intelligent communication both ways. So spot on, Joy.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I have some pet peeves about, a lot of things being attributed to spirit that I think are more sensationalized. Now, I want to come on to talking a little bit about the last few years of your life, because things have changed quite a bit, right? In the beginning of 2022, in February of 2022, you and I had the opportunity to meet. We got to know each other. We were doing our own little after hours paranormal investigation at the Arthur Findlay College in the UK in Stansted, which is a college well known for studies of psychic and mediumistic sciences, and some of the world's best tutors are there. So we just so happened serendipitously to be on the same week taking a course together. And little did we know, we had several paranormal experiences over that weekend, but what was going on in the world in the background at the time brewing was COVID-19. And you actually first contracted it and became ill as a part of that trip. Is that right?
It wasn't from that trip. It was immediately after that trip.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me,
I remember you were sick when we got home. We were all checking and seeing how everyone was. And I remember you were sick and it was dicey. And
I was. So that I was sick through travel. I don't believe that I had COVID at that time. I did end up getting it on March 10th. So the day before it was declared a pandemic was the first day I really had COVID symptoms. I did have some other illness that had come from that trip. But for me, I did get COVID very, very early on, about a month, really, truly about a month after we got back. And I still don't know where I got it. It was the wild type of COVID, obviously no vaccines at the time. And assume I got it on my way to work or at work. And I became very, very ill very quickly. And it's been a long journey. So I can go down that route if you would like.
It's been a journey. Yeah. And I would just like to share with everyone that, you've always been an activist by nature. It's just a part of who you are, and you've done activism work before, but this has pulled you in a direction that's very personal because you don't have the same effect that necessarily everyone has from COVID. You have a different experience of this, which I think is becoming more officially termed long COVID at this point. Is that the correct way to address it? And can you talk a little bit about your experience and what you would want everyone to know about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I got sick with COVID, it was at a time when we were very unsure of what the outcomes were. The thought was it was either death or you're fine. You'll recover in 2 weeks, and that was it. And when I got sick, that was not my experience. I actually started getting worse at around week 3. I developed pneumonia. My experiences were also originally with COVID, not respiratory in nature. I had more gastrointestinal neurological. So my experience right off the bat was like nothing that was being talked about within the news and via public health agencies. And so for me, I was in this middle path of this kind of limbo, if you will, of what is happening to me. I didn't die, but I sure as anything was not recovering. And I very quickly realized that no one was talking about that. So prior to COVID, I did do a little bit of activism back in my college days with disability justice. I was, part of a committee for that, but I hadn't really done much. And I also hadn't really, we talk about people finding their voice. I definitely had not found my voice when I had COVID. And I was not the type of person to generally go to the media. I was much more insecure in it was lacking in confidence. And I talked about this before, that self-worth, right? So I really pushed myself out of my comfort zone because I didn't want others to think that there was just these two outcomes. I wanted people to know that there was other symptoms that were not being discussed and that there was this other middle path that we now know is called long COVID. So for me, I went to the news early on in March 2020, and I started advocating really just to get people to understand that there was this middle risk, that there was middle ground that wasn't being discussed, and that it was this route of chronic illness and disability. And I did not know it at the time. I was not knowledgeable about chronic illness. This is my first experience with chronic illness. So I didn't know, I really was gaslighting myself. There's something called ableism, internalized ableism, that I absolutely was harboring, kept thinking I was going to get better, that recovery, it's just around the corner. I'll get better tomorrow. Yeah. And I wasn't getting better. And so my experience it's been a battle for the past close to 3 years now. And what I think has been really interesting throughout it, though, is that, so I have experienced issues across, long COVID is systemic. It's a multi-system, full body attack. We know that COVID is a vascular disease. And we know that, our body, we run off of blood. Wherever our blood is, there is potential for damage. And for me, my experience is I had a stroke. I had visually impaired in my left eye as a result. So a lot of really traumatic events that have happened to me. I won't go down that rabbit hole. But what I think my biggest takeaway, what I hope that people know, is that it really, your future self is worth protecting. And ultimately, that's just what I need people to know. And I hope people know that, because if I could go back, if I could have worn a mask back then and prevented myself from having a whole host of issues that I've been having, I would totally do it in a heartbeat. But it has been a very difficult chronic illness journey for me. And going back to the voice, the only quote unquote silver lining is that it did allow me to find my voice, that because there were so many wrongs happening to myself and others, I had to speak up. And spiritually, that was a really interesting experience with that whole process as well.
Thanks for being so open and sharing. And I know that you have shared so much of your journey on social media, and you now have really stepped into this voice and into activism. And I mean, you'll have to tell me your feelings on this, but I feel like sometimes when something becomes so personal to us, it's almost like we're forced to step all the way out of our comfort zone and scream it from the mountaintops for you, just to get the basic care and understanding that you need, which based on your recent posts, it seems like still isn't happening for yourself and others that are experiencing this form of long COVID.
It's so true. And we are, unfortunately, I think, if more people were going outside of their comfort zone, who were experiencing this, and I think if more people were discussing this openly, and it's a very vulnerable thing to share such intimate details about your health, about your life, about your struggles, the mental health issues that are associated with chronic illness that nobody talks about, the loneliness, the rejection, the fact that, people mute you when you're just trying to help them and trying to advocate for a better future for them. I think it is not for the faint of heart. And I think a lot of people do shy away from it. So unfortunately, because of that, I think there is this view that it's not really affecting that many people. Unfortunately, a lot of people are being affected by this. There's just a lot of stigma around talking about these types of things. A lot of people don't want to rock the boat. I think a lot of people are viewed as being complainers or whatever it may be, but there's a lot of negativity that's ascribed to activism and advocacy. But in reality, activism and advocacy is one of the most empathetic things that you can do. It's about bettering the future, bettering the lives of others. It's about compassion for others. And it's about, in my case especially, but really, this is really what advocacy is. It's about helping people to be better off than you, to not be in your shoes. And so for me, it was something that I was never comfortable talking openly about my deepest struggles. I didn't even confront them within myself over and over again, despite all these spiritual awakenings we go through. I still was like, we're not going to sweep that under the rug. But for me, I didn't really have a choice, because I knew that what I was experiencing, others were experiencing, and I knew that I had to just set aside my ego and set aside my own privacy needs and do what's the best thing for humankind, which was to voice this. But still no answers, still little help. We're still gaslit. Unfortunately, there's a lot of medical sexism and racism involved as well. But I've experienced the medical sexism like crazy. A lot of psychologization of this illness, but it's very physiological. And I think the finding the voice side of it was something that I did not expect to be part of my chronic illness journey. I think that, previously I would have, in a perfect world, in a world that was more compassionate and empathetic, I would have just gone into my recovery cave and would have just quietly tried to get myself back to a state of healing. But because I knew that one, it was not happening because there was no treatments available. And two, I knew that there were so many others that were coming after me that were going to be experiencing what I was experiencing. I knew that I just had to swallow my pride with it and come forward. And it was and is very difficult to do. It's a very misunderstood condition. It's a very misunderstood role to be an advocate. And I think a lot of people, because of the politicalization and all of the litany of issues surrounding COVID and the challenges facing it, I think, unfortunately, a lot of people just tune out. And it's really sad, because I think if they were just to listen to what us advocates say, they would realize that we are going out of our way to educate others out of sheer love. That's what it is. That's all it is.
Yeah. Which I know is your perspective and the way that you walk in the world as a friend, it's been so beautiful to see you so vulnerably and openly share your journey. I mean, many times you've posted from inside hospital rooms or emergency rooms and have been just really direct and honest about that you're also coming from a perspective of privilege and how this, I don't know, lack of understanding, lack of treatment, lack of humanitarianism that people should be experiencing is even less among BIPOC and otherwise marginalized people in our society. So that's been just, I think, really powerful to be able to use your platform to spread that message. Like you were saying, it's not always the most popular thing to be talking about, and it's been really polarizing in our society. But from inside, going through your own struggle and your own journey and the ebb and flow and ups and downs that you've so publicly and just in a raw way have shared so beautifully. I just wonder, how have you seen things change, if at all? Do you feel like, I mean, this must be a little grating for you as a U.S. government employee on the other side of it, but do you feel like you're seeing any positive forward movement, or is there anything that you would encourage others to do to support, the information cause, at least around all of this?
So I'd say from 2020 until now, there has been some progress. It hasn't been all lost hope. There's been some progress. It is not where we need to be, especially with the scale of this pandemic within a pandemic. And especially because this is human lives and futures. Nothing is ever enough when it comes to that. You need to be doing everything now and, putting all of your resources towards it. But that's unfortunately not happening. I think, though, where there is hope now is that people know the name, they know the term, they at least know that long COVID exists. Whether or not they believe or fully comprehend what long COVID is and the seriousness of it is a totally different story. And I think there's a lot of people that, again, going back to fear, are fearful of the thought of chronic illness, because you can become chronically ill overnight. That's what happened to me. And oftentimes we are. And it makes us face our own mortality. And that's a very scary thing. So I think a lot of people who do choose to tune out what we do know now, what's in the news, I think of some of it comes from this place of this fear of, oh, it can happen to me. So if I just don't acknowledge it, then I don't have to acknowledge that it's real, and I don't have to acknowledge that it's a risk to me. And I can just pretend like it's not going to happen to me, which is a scary place to be in, because knowledge truly is power. And so there is change now. I think what I would hope that people would do, though, I think my biggest hope with all of this and with my advocacy is that you do not tune out what advocates are saying, about everything, but especially with long COVID, because long COVID is unfortunately becoming more of a reality for so many people. And there are simple things that you can do to prevent it. And I think for me, my biggest hope is that education can save people. And, what you do with that, everyone has their free will, of course, but at the very least, just allow yourself to be informed, to make informed decisions. That's my hope here. But we are a ways out in terms of making progress, but our advancements in the chronic illness world and post-infectious chronic illness have gone leaps and bounds and are going leaps and bounds from what it was prior to COVID. There's another condition called ME/CFS that has been viewed as a psychological illness when it is identical to long COVID and very serious and very debilitating. So the work that's being done towards long COVID is helping scores of people across the chronic illness community, because it's legitimizing these very real physiological conditions.
And it just reminds me, I have a background in wellness and natural medicine and massage therapy, and it just reminds me of a time when fibromyalgia was gaslit and was considered more of a psychological condition, when now everyone knows that that's an actual physical manifested in the body condition. And so I can't help but, I guess it's a weird hope to have, but I can't help but hope that sooner than later, perhaps the spectrum that is long COVID, because it's not the same for everyone, as you point out on your posts, and you're so educational on your social media, which is incredible. You've become this wonderful resource for all of us, but it doesn't manifest the same in everyone. It doesn't look the same in everyone. It can kind of shapeshift and appear to be other things. And it seems like doctors are still very confused about putting all the symptoms together. And I guess depending on perhaps, the level of care that someone's receiving, part of the world that they're in, sometimes things that are pretty critical symptoms in this type of diagnosis. I just learned this from you in a recent post. Sometimes these symptoms are not counted or included in the list of symptoms. There is, oh, you're just complaining about that, or, oh, that's unrelated, or that doesn't equal this, which I'm really hoping that very quickly things move in a better direction for you and everyone else, all of us.
I hope so too. I really do. And you're spot on. I mean, MS is a great example too, where MS we now know is caused by Epstein-Barr virus. It's a post-infectious illness, and it is a serious condition. And that was actually viewed as
even Epstein-Barr virus itself. Yeah, even Epstein-Barr virus itself was at one point, not considered valid. So it was a mystery, thing that, so it's also fascinating. And I'm sorry that you're having to do a lot of your own legwork. And I'm so grateful to have you as an activist. For those listening that might have some healing gifts or abilities or sensitivities in that way, I know sometimes we feel so helpless on the outside looking in, or, even with people that we know. Is there anything that we can be doing to kind of lend healing and support in a general way besides the activism that we need to all be doing?
I think, well, one, obviously mask wearing is great. It's the easiest way to help people to not get long COVID yourself. I think that's key. But I think from a healing modality perspective, I've had distance Reiki done for me, and I've had acupuncture and so forth, but I will tell you that Reiki has been a phenomenal support. And I think that, I think it's important for those within the healing modalities to be empathetic with their clients, to listen to the full scope of symptoms, to understand that it's systemic, and to just allow your patients to essentially just to speak, to let you know what their symptoms are, to listen compassionately, and then from there, use your abilities to help. But I will tell you that Reiki has been so supportive for me, and especially when it comes to my mental health. I will tell you that it has had, just for me personally, there are a lot of mental health challenges that come with long COVID. And every single time that I have had a Reiki session done, and for me, it's been distance Reiki since I'm immunocompromised, I have felt truthfully like the clouds have parted every single time. And it has helped me to forge on for weeks and months, and until, I have my next session and so forth. But I tell every patient that I speak to that they need to be open, if they can be, to Reiki, that it is incredibly supportive and healing. And I think for practitioners to welcome long COVID patients with open arms, because, beyond just the mental support, it obviously can give physical support too. But for me personally, I think it's helped to keep me in this world. It's helped truly to help me feel more balanced, and me return sort of to how I felt mentally, at least before I got COVID.
Wow. Thanks for validating that, because I just am such a fan of Reiki. I'm a practitioner and a teacher, and I just think that it's got a lot to offer. And I'm so happy that it's been beneficial for you in your healing journey. As we know, you're still in the midst of this journey, but hopefully in a more stable place right now. I don't have a super smooth transition, and I tend to be a little awkward just in general, but I really want to get you to do the spirit speed round. I know I've kept you way over the time that I promised you. Are you up for a change of gears?
Oh, yeah. Bring it on.
Okay. exciting. I'm super excited about this. I just know, I just feel like through this journey and through this, these challenges, you've grown so much as a person. So I'm super excited to see your answers to these. They're not hard. They are fun. Okay. Will you share with us one thing that really shocked you or was unexpected about your mediumistic gifts yourself?
I think what shocked me the most about my mediumistic gifts for me has been the fact that I know this is going to sound really bizarre, the fact that how do I word this? That I can feel people's passings. I never thought when I first got into mediumship that I would be able to experience someone's passing. And as someone that's always thought about, what's going to happen when I die? What's it going to feel like? It has actually given me so much peace with my own mortality and with my own passing, because I have felt, hundreds of other people's passings. And in a way, and it's almost not normalized it for me, but it has helped me to drop the fear of my own passing, because I have, in glimpses, as we know through mediumship, felt at least a tiny fraction of what it's like. And it has taken away a huge fear factor. So for me, that has been the most shocking experience. I never thought that mediumship would make me well, of course it would, but I never thought it would make me be at peace with my own passing in the future.
I love that answer. I think people don't often understand the gifts that the medium receives, as a medium doing this work. And that's a really beautiful gift that we do receive. It's just a different understanding. I love that answer. Next question. If you got to spend a day in the spirit world, you got the full tour, you got to spend time with everyone you've ever known who's crossed over, everyone you love, and it's almost time to return to your normal life, and your guide tells you have 1 hour left and you can spend it with anyone who's on the other side, who do you choose and why?
Who would I choose to spend it with? I think I would choose, God, there's so many people. But to be honest, this is going to
I told you, these are hard questions. This is that kind of hard.
This is going to be a weird answer, so bear with me here. But I would ask to spend it with Jesus. And it's not because I'm a religious person. I am very much, I believe in, honestly, all religions. I believe that there's truth in all religion. But I would specifically want to meet with Jesus two-pronged for two different reasons. One, I just want to know if he was a medium, because I do feel that there is a little bit of if not the whole Bible is a channeling exercise. So I would love to be able to connect with him and just to learn from him and just get a sense of, from a spiritual perspective, what he was like when he was in human form. Was he a Reiki healer? He was clearly a healer. What were his healing abilities? Yeah. Was he a medium? So I would love to be able to just discern that from him for my own validation, because that is just a belief that I have always held. And two, I would love to be able to get a sense of what he thinks about the worship that people have, how they worship him now. And, if it's something that he feels that his teachings have been changed in ways that aren't true to what he had wanted, if he views it as something that is embarrassing, if this is something he never wanted to be worshipped, because he's a very humble human being, and he was also quite the activist as well, and stood up for those lesser or not lesser, but more vulnerable and marginalized, had lesser positions in the community. So I think getting a sense from him as to really what his view is on the way that people talk about him, speak to his teachings, and if they align with what he actually taught, for me would be fascinating. So I would love that. I would love to split the time with other people though, but he would be the ultimate.
Yeah. I would love to read a transcript of that conversation, because I think those are all fascinating questions that we could all benefit from the answers from. Okay, even though we have spiritual gifts, we have very human lives. What is one quirky thing about you that people might be surprised to learn?
Oh God, there's so many. But and I don't hide it very well.
That's how I feel about this question too.
I do not hide it, but I think there's one.
I know, it's one of my favorite things about you.
I should hide it, because I feel like people would be like, I probably have a lot more. Oh, I have anyway. I think that, what is the quirkiest thing? I think the quirkiest thing
doesn't have to be the quirkiest.
Okay.
Just be one quirk.
I guess one quirk about me is that, actually, this is probably it makes sense in the context of what we discussed, but I have cameras throughout the house, including in our bedroom, on top of our bed, which, most people would not do, and most partners would not be okay with either. But I have cameras all over the house to track the various spiritual activity in our home, just because I feel them at night, I feel them tuck me in, and I just want to show people how loving the spirit world is. So I have cameras of me, in my PJs with my crazy bed head, no makeup, looking an absolute mess, and I share them with the world because I want people to see just
you do, which is my
gentle.
favorite part.
I want people to see how gentle and how authentic and real they are, and that they're just people like us. But that's probably the most bizarre thing that people would not expect, is that I'm someone that has cameras in my bedroom, that I'm actually filming myself sleeping, that this isn't some creepy human that
for
has
the purpose of spirit photography.
For the purpose of spirit photography, exactly.
Not for security, but for
exactly
spirit experiments. I love that. And I think it's, for those that don't follow you yet, they're going to want to, because you show a lot of this footage. You pretty regularly post clips of this that are unedited. Yep. So it's a lot of fun to get to see, and it kind of makes me wish I had cameras to watch spirits around my house.
You can always add them.
Okay, last question. Yeah, hey, I might. Leave us with one pearl of wisdom. What's one piece of advice that you wish that you had had early in your understanding of your gifts?
There are many, but I think the one thing that I wish that I knew earlier on was that the spirit world is just a thought away, and that we, in our humanness, overcomplicate, and some teachers as well, overcomplicate spirit communication, that it is innate within us. We do not have to try, that the more that we try, the harder it is for us. And I think that if I had known that if I just needed to relax, trust, and enjoy, that I would have better connections. I would be able to better articulate the stories of our loved ones on the other side. If I had known that earlier on, I would have built up more trust in myself as well as the spirit world, and I would have been more confident in myself as a medium, which would have propelled me further and helped me advance further. I think that for me, I keep every single time that I do a reading, before I do a reading, because I'm still developing, as we all are. And that's something that's important to know too, is that we are never done developing. And anyone who thinks that they're done developing, as far as I'm concerned, they need to go back to mediumship school because they have a lot. There's always more to learn, always more to grow. But the acronym of RTE, I always tell myself, go the route. So relax, trust, and enjoy. And if I had known that very early on and just decomplicated mediumship for myself that way, and just trusted and allowed myself to relax into it, and most importantly, to enjoy the communications, I think it wouldn't have been such a struggle for me in terms of accepting this part of myself and allowing the communications to flow. We get in our way so much. Spirit world does not get in our way. They are never wrong. They give us good information. It is us second guessing. It's us doubting ourselves. That is, where we get our no's and where we have our biggest hiccups in mediumship. And if we just allowed ourselves to go the route, RTE, then I think that we all would have a much better experience. And I think it would be a much smoother development process, I would think.
That is really great advice. Thank you for sharing that with us today. I love that pearl of wisdom. And thank you for not only talking to us about spirit photography and all of your own journeys, but this new segment of your journey in the last few years with health and wellness, and what that means for you as an individual, and what that means for you as a teacher and a leader in this spiritual work. I really appreciate you sharing this time with us. And it's one of my favorite things about being on your Instagram page, is that you so openly and vulnerably share like this all the time. And I'm just so grateful to have had this conversation with you. Thanks for being here.
Oh, Joy, it is mutual. You know how much I absolutely love you and appreciate you. And thank you so much for having this space and this community, truly. You are filling a gap and helping so many people understand their own abilities and to normalize this too, which is so important. So thank you.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing your light with us today.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with psychic medium Lauren Nichols. I don't know which one of those I'm going to try first. I definitely am going to order myself a little twist battery operated flashlight. The one I have, I was talking to Lauren actually before we popped on, and the one I have, it's right here. It's a push button. And she was saying, no, you have to get the twist. And so I'm going to get that. I also am excited to try the spirit photography. What do you guys think? Are you going to try any of this? Does this feel a little outside your comfort zone? Is this something that you have played with and explored before and you have your own tips about, you know, like Lauren was talking about, how do we tell if something is dust, or how do we know, you know, that energy of where the spirit is, or when is the right moment to snap that photo? Do you have any tips yourself, or have you tried some of this and you want to share your experience? I'd love to hear any of it, either in the comments or in my Facebook group, Joy's Soul Spa. I pop on there all the time and I am posting and answering questions there. If you're not already on Lauren's Instagram, you're going to want to pop over there. It's obviously Instagram.com. So at Lauren the Medium, and it's Lauren, Lauren, just like it sounds, Lauren the Medium. And I'll also post all of this in the show notes, as well as on my website, joyfulmedium.com/blog. You can find the full episode with the video too, if you want to see us and hear us at the same time. The transcripts there, all the show notes, all the links for everything that we mentioned will be there. So you don't want to miss that if you're wanting to find out about the hotels that she mentioned, or check out her pages, her link tree, her activism with long COVID. And as you know, all of our voices matter now with legislation, with the way things are moving forward, with healthcare and everything else. So thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I hope that you learned a little something. I know I definitely did. I'm so excited to try some of this, and I'll be sharing what I try and what I find in the Joy Soul Spa Facebook group. It's free to join. You're all welcome if you're not already there. And I look forward to talking more about this and hearing all of your experiences. Thanks for being with me today. Big hugs. Bye for now. I'll see you next time inside the Spirit Speakeasy.